She was a mother who gave everything, her strength, her love, her whole life for her only son. She went hungry so he could eat. She worked under the hot sun so he could have a brighter future. But when that same son became rich, he turned his back on her. Being influenced by his wife, he kicked his own mother out of the very house she had helped him build. Alone and heartbroken, the poor woman walked into a world that had once rejected her. But life has a way of turning stories around. What became of this poor elderly mother after her son's betrayal? And what shocking thing later happened to her son because of his foolish act? Sit back with your popcorn and find out as we delve into this emotional story of sacrifice, heartbreak, and surprising lessons. Long ago, in a beautiful city called Novo, there lived a kind and compassionate woman named Margaret and her son David. Life had never been kind to them. Margaret had fallen in love and gotten married to a strange man against her parents' warnings. But her life turned upside down after her husband abandoned her when David was still a baby. She waited and hoped he would return, but he never showed up. And so, Margaret had to carry the burden of raising her son all by herself. None of her family members offered to help. "We warned you," they all said. "You were stubborn in love. Now bear the consequences of your own actions." Margaret worked hard for years and never gave up. Many times, she did not know how she would survive the next day, but she did whatever she could to ensure David lacked nothing a child needed. She wanted him to grow and have a brighter future. Many years passed, and at last, the door of blessings opened. David finished his education and was fortunate enough to land a well-paying job in a big company. Even though he didn't have the experience for the position, it felt like a miracle, and for the first time, their lives began to change. David bought a beautiful house and moved in with his mother. Her heart was full of joy and happiness. She was so glad that after so many years of pain and hard work, she was finally enjoying the sweet reward of her long sacrifices. But just when everything seemed bright and perfect, their lives took a new, unexpected turn. And this all happened the moment he met Beatrice, a very beautiful woman with a soft voice, whom he met during one of his vacations. David's heart was captured the moment he set his eyes on her. From that moment, he couldn't stop thinking about her. He spent the whole vacation with her, and by the time the vacation was over, he had fallen deeply in love with her. After he returned from the vacation, he brought Beatrice home to meet his mother. His mother welcomed her warmly, but in her heart, she could tell that something was not right. Beatrice had a beautiful smile and a soft voice, but Margaret could see beyond the smile. She could feel that Beatrice's heart was not as gentle as she wanted everyone to believe. And so, after Beatrice left that day, Margaret tried to warn David. "My son, be careful. This woman may not love you the way you love her," she said. "There's something about her that doesn't feel genuine. Her expressions, her words, they all seem a bit fake." But David was blinded by love. His heart was too full of Beatrice. To him, at that moment, Beatrice was the most precious person in the world. He ignored his mother's gentle warnings and followed his emotions. Some months later, he married Beatrice, despite his mother's gentle warning. After the wedding, the house was filled with laughter and joy at first. But deep inside, Margaret's heart remained troubled. She prayed quietly, hoping she was wrong about Beatrice. But soon, things began to change, just as she had predicted. One fateful evening, David hosted a very big party in his home. It was the happiest night of his life. He had just been promoted at work, and he was celebrating his success. The house was full of very important people from the city, dressed in beautiful, expensive clothes. Everyone laughed and discussed in the big living room, shaking David's hand to congratulate him. But in the middle of all the noise, his mother sat quietly in a corner. She wore a simple dress and watched. She didn't shine like the other women in expensive gowns and jewelry, but her heart was glowing. She fixed her eyes on her son, and she was proud and happy for him. Many people walked past her without a word. No one noticed her, but she didn't mind. She just sat there with a thankful, grateful, and proud heart for her son. Beatrice, on the other hand, was enjoying the moment. She wore a very expensive gown with gold jewelry and associated with the guests so beautifully. She smiled and laughed all evening. But when her eyes settled on Margaret, who simply sat unnoticed, admiring her son, her face suddenly changed from a smile to a frown. Later that evening, after the party was over, when David and Beatrice retired for the night, Beatrice turned to him. She touched his hand as if trying to get to his heart, and spoke gently but convincingly. "David," she said, Don't you think it's time we had our own space? Just me and you. Your mother, she's old. She doesn't really fit in with this new life. Maybe you should send her to the village." David's heart stopped for a moment. He looked at Beatrice with wide eyes. His mind felt heavy. He could not believe what he had just heard. "Beatrice," he said slowly, "my mother's presence doesn't affect us in any way. She is always in her room. She makes her own meals, and she never troubles us. So why exactly is she a problem?" Beatrice quickly smiled and answered innocently, even though her eyes told a different story. "I am not saying your mother is a problem. I just think she is not used to this life of luxury and wealth. She is not educated and exposed like us. But I'm sorry if you get me wrong," she said, and hugged him passionately, as if she had agreed that the matter was over. But deep inside her heart, she had already made a decision. "One way or another, I must make sure that the old woman leaves this house," she thought to herself even as she smiled at David. She didn't want Margaret to ruin her plan in David's life. In the days that followed, Beatrice's smile never left her face when David was around. She laughed with him and spoke kindly, but behind those sweet smiles was a plan. Beatrice knew she could not force Margaret out of the house by arguing with David, so she decided instead to plant tiny seeds of doubts in David's heart and give him reasons to chase his mother out of his house. She started by framing Margaret for things she didn't do. One morning, David entered the kitchen to drink some water, but what he saw on the kitchen floor shocked him to the bones. There were pieces of broken glasses of wine cups littered everywhere. When he confronted Beatrice about what he saw, she took a deep breath and shook her head gently. "This wouldn't be the first time this would happen. Maybe your mother doesn't realize how fragile these things are. She's not used to living in a house like this," she said. But David frowned and waved it off. "It's just glass, Beatrice. I'll buy another one when I go to the mall." But Beatrice was patient. Every day, she found a new way to make it seem as though Margaret's presence was a burden. Sometimes she would lie and complain that Margaret enters their room without knocking whenever he goes to work. Meanwhile, David's mother had already begun to notice something strange in the house. The air felt different, not warm like before. She could feel David slowly changing. At first, it was small things. The way he looked at her, the way he answered her greetings, and most of all, the way his wife, Beatrice, spoke to her. Deep inside, Margaret knew that Beatrice wanted her gone, but she tried to stay quiet. She told herself, maybe God will change things. Maybe it will get better. Beatrice tried everything she could think of. She spoke softly to David, then even with tears, hoping he would finally ask his mother to leave. But no matter what she said, David did not send Margaret away. This made Beatrice restless. She could not understand why David kept holding on to his mother. In her heart, she felt angry, and that anger grew bigger every day. Then one evening, Beatrice sat alone and thought to herself, if David will not send her away by himself, then I will give him a reason. I will show him something that will make him turn against her completely. It was a dark thought, a thought she had never allowed into her heart before. But now she had no choice anymore. She decided she would frame Margaret. She would make it look as if David's own mother had done something wrong, something so bad that David would no longer be able to defend her. Beatrice's eyes hardened as she began to think. Then finally, she thought of something very evil. One fateful afternoon, Beatrice sat in her room, her heart beating fast as she looked at the small bundle of herbs in her hand. They were dry, with a bitter smell. Herbs she collected from an old woman at the market earlier that day. The old woman had told her it could stop a woman from ever having children. It was dangerous, and Beatrice knew exactly what to do. She waited patiently until Margaret was in the kitchen. Then, step by step, she quietly sneaked into Margaret's room. She moved with quiet footsteps, like a shadow, trying not to make any noise or change the position of anything in the room. She looked around the room desperately, trying to find the right place to hide the herbs. Then she finally opened the drawer and carefully hid the herbs where no one would easily find them. When she was done, she closed everything slowly and walked out quietly just as she had come. When she got back to her room, her eyes were cold and she smiled like an evil witch who had just done something terrible. This time, David will have no choice but to chase her out of the house when he finds the herbs and sees it with his own eyes. Later that evening, when David returned from work, he was very tired, but as he stepped into the house, he noticed everywhere was unusually quiet. He didn't find Beatrice watching movies in the living room as she normally does. When he got to the door of his bedroom, something caught him by surprise. He heard the sound of someone crying. It was Beatrice. His heart jumped, and he hurried inside the room at once. He found her sitting on the floor. Her shoulders were shaking as she wept seriously, as if she had just lost someone close to her. Her face was wet with tears. "Beatrice, what is it? What happened?" David asked her impatiently. His voice was full of worry as he quickly sat beside her. Beatrice didn't answer immediately. She continued crying. "Why are you crying like this?" "Please tell me what happened," David asked impatiently. Beatrice lifted her face slowly. Her eyes were red. She took a shaky breath and spoke in a low voice. "David, I did not want to say this, but today, I saw something your mother did." David looked at her surprised. "My mother? What are you talking about? What did she do?" Beatrice cried harder, covering her face with her hands. She made sure David was very desperate to know what happened before she finally spoke again. "David, today when I left our room, I saw your mother. She was acting strange. Very strange. She looked around as if she did not want anyone to see her, but she didn't know I saw her. I grew curious, so I followed her quietly. And then..." Beatrice's voice started breaking as she cried softly while narrating her cooked-up story. "I saw her sprinkle something into the pot of food I cooked for myself. I did not want to believe it. I prayed I was wrong. But after she left, I went to check the pot myself. And I saw some herbs in my pot of soup. She turned it very well, but they hadn't fully dissolved when I saw it. I was shocked when I discovered what those herbs do to the body. My doctor said the herbs damage the womb and cause infertility. I wouldn't have believed it if I hadn't seen it with my own eyes. I am sure she hides it somewhere in her room." David's face turned red with shock. No, Beatrice. That cannot be true. My mother would never do such a thing." Beatrice held his hand tightly and looked deep into his eyes. "David, I am your wife. Why would I lie to you about this? I know she has never liked me. And now, this, David, don't you see? She wants to harm me. She wants to stop me from giving you children." Beatrice wept louder, her voice full of pain. David's chest burned with anger and confusion. He stood up at once. His mind told him to protect and trust his mother, but Beatrice's words echoed through his mind once again. With anger in his heart, he walked straight into his mother's room without knocking on her door. His mother was there, folding some of her clothes. The moment she saw him, she looked at him with a warm smile, but that smile faded when she saw his eyes blazing with fire. "David, my son, what is it?" she asked softly. But David did not answer at first. He ignored her and began to search her room. He opened the wardrobe. He pulled out the drawer, and then, to his greatest pain, he saw some herbs in a white nylon. They were hidden neatly, exactly where Beatrice had placed them. His hands trembled as he held them up in shock and disappointment. "Mother!" David's voice thundered. "What is this?" "Tell me, what is this doing in your room?" Margaret's eyes widened. Her mouth opened, but no words came out at first. She stepped forward quickly, shaking her head in confusion. "David, my son, I do not know how this came here. I swear to you, I do not know. What is that? What does it do?" Just then, Beatrice entered quietly. Her eyes were full of fake sorrow. She stood behind David and spoke in a soft, broken voice. "David, you see? You see why I always wanted her gone? She never liked me. She never wanted me in this house." Then Margaret turned to her son with pain in her heart. "David, please, you know me. You know my heart. I raised you. I loved you. I stood by you all your life. Believe me, my son, I will never do anything to hurt you or your wife." Her voice cracked with pain as tears started to flow from her eyes. But David's mind was clouded. He remembered the warnings his mother had given him long ago when he wanted to marry Beatrice. He remembered her words and her doubts. His heart twisted with anger and hurt. "You never liked her, Mother. That was why you never wanted me to marry her in the first place. That's why you warned me about her when I introduced her to you. But trying to damage her womb, to risk her life, that is too much," he shouted, his voice shaking. "You never accepted her. That is why you did this. Admit it, Mother. This was your plan all along." David! No, no, please! Margaret cried, almost going on her knees. But David turned his face away. Tears of anger dropped down from his eyes. Enough! I will hear no more. You must leave this house tomorrow. Do you hear me? Tomorrow. And as soon as he said that, he threw the herbs at her and stormed out of the room while Beatrice followed him behind, leaving his mother broken. Margaret stood frozen in the middle of the room. Her hands and legs shook beneath her, and her heart started beating very fast. Her son's words kept echoing in her ears, louder than thunder. You must leave this house tomorrow. Her heart broke into 1,000 pieces. She felt as though her world had turned upside down. She sat slowly onto the floor. Her knees were too weak to hold her. Tears poured down her face without control, and she cried like she had never cried before. Oh God, she said through her tears. Why would my own son believe such lies about me? Why would he think I could ever harm him or his wife? She laid on the floor and continued crying. Daniel and Beatrice could hear her cries and pain from their room, but they ignored her. And then, as her tears flowed, her mind began to wander, and she began to remember the journey of her life with David from the very beginning, when she was still a young, beautiful woman. David was just a few days old when his father abandoned them, leaving them with nothing but pain. She remembered the nights she wept quietly because she had no one to help her. Every day, she rose before the sun came up and went out to do menial jobs. She washed clothes for strangers, scrubbed floors until her hands started hurting her, carried heavy loads on her head under the hot sun until her body almost gave up, just to make sure that David lacked nothing in life. She remembered how she would stay hungry so David could eat. She remembered the hard days when her legs felt too weak to keep walking, days when she wondered if she could go on. Her mind moved forward to the day David got into university. It should have been the happiest day of her life. But instead, it became another mountain to climb. She had no money for his school fees. She swallowed her pride and went from house to house, begging, pleading. Some people mocked her. Some insulted her. Others turned her away as though she was worthless. She remembered standing under the sun, sweat pouring down her back, her heart breaking as she begged for money just to send her son to school. She faced humiliation, but she never gave up, because all she wanted was for David to succeed. She remembered kneeling night after night beside her bed, crying and praying. Oh Lord, please bless my son. Please make him successful. Do not let my tears be wasted. Do not let my suffering be in vain. She wept until her eyes were swollen, until her voice was gone, but she never stopped praying. She remembered all this now, sitting on the cold floor of her room in tears. She wept until her eyes were swollen and her voice was gone, but she never stopped praying. She recalled all this, sitting on the cold floor of her room, tears streaming down her face. And now, the same son was standing against her, believing lies about her, telling her to leave the home she had fought so hard to give him. And as she wept, her memories kept playing in her heart. Memories of sacrifice, of love, of battles fought alone, of nights filled with hunger and tears. The night passed slowly for Margaret. She hardly slept. Her eyes were swollen from crying, but her heart was still heavy with pain. Each time she closed her eyes, she heard her son's angry voice again. You must leave this house tomorrow. By morning, Margaret began to fold her clothes into a small bag. She wiped her eyes and walked out of her room. David was in the sitting room. His face was cold and filled with anger. He did not look like the boy she had raised. Beatrice sat quietly beside him, her hands folded on her lap and her head bowed, pretending to look sad. But inside her heart, she was smiling. She had finally won. Margaret's voice trembled as she spoke. David, my son, before I leave, please listen to me. I am your mother. I carried you in my womb. I raised you with my tears. I fed you with my sweat. Do you not know me? Do you not know my heart? I would never harm you or your wife. I want grandchildren too. What reason could I have to hurt Beatrice? But David's mind was made up already. Without looking at her, he said, Mother, please. I saw the herbs with my own eyes. Do not deny it. Margaret stepped closer, her eyes wet with tears. Think, my son. Think carefully. Who gains from this? Who wants me gone? Do you not see? Beatrice has framed me. She put those herbs in my room. She lied to you. One day you will understand. One day you will regret this." David's face hardened even more. His voice rose in anger. "Enough! Enough of these excuses. You have hated Beatrice since the day I brought her into this house. You warned me not to marry her. And now you want me to believe she is the liar? No, Mother. I will not listen anymore. You must leave. Today." Margaret's tears poured down her cheeks. Her lips shook as she went on her knees. "David, my son, my only son, please, do not do this to me. One day you will see the truth, and your heart will bleed with regret. Do not push me away." But David's anger burned hotter. In his fury, he stood up from where he sat, grabbed her bag, and pushed it toward her. "Go! Leave my house at once!" His voice thundered. Margaret's heart broke all over again. She picked up her bag slowly, her tears falling onto it. With shaking legs, she walked to the door. Just before stepping out, she turned one last time. Her face was wet and full of sorrow. "David," she called him softly, "I forgive you. I will always love you. But remember this day. One day the truth will shine, and you will know I was innocent." David turned his face away, refusing to look into her eyes. Beatrice remained quiet where she sat, lowering her head to hide the smile that was forming on her lips. Inside her heart, she rejoiced. "At last," she thought, "at last, I have won. His mother is gone." Outside the house, the morning sun was bright and hot. Margaret walked slowly down the path with heavy steps and tears still falling from her eyes. She had no place to go. Her mind searched, but there was no answer. She could not go back to her family. Long ago, when she chose to marry David's father, they had warned her. They had begged her not to, but she did not listen. And when he finally abandoned her, her family turned their backs on her too. They said she had brought shame to them. Since then, she had lived her life alone, with only her son as her reason to keep going. Now, even her son had cast her away. As she walked, the sun rose higher, beating down on her head, just like the years she had once worked under that same sun. She looked around, and people passed her by, all going about their own lives. She thought, and finally, a name came to her mind. Grace, an old friend. A kind woman who had once helped her many years ago to find a small job when things were hard. And she decided to find the woman, hoping that she would not turn her away. With little hope in her heart, Margaret changed her path and started walking towards the city where Grace lived. A lot of questions were on her mind. What if she refuses me, she thought. But she had no other choice. She stood on the highway which led to the city where Grace lived, and luckily for her, a good Samaritan offered to take her to the city. When she finally reached Grace's house, she stood outside for a long moment, praying in her heart that she would not be pushed away. Then she knocked gently on the door. The door opened some seconds later, and Grace showed up. Her eyes widened in surprise when their eyes met. "Margaret!" She almost screamed in shock. "Is it really you? My goodness, what has happened to you?" Margaret tried to speak, but her voice broke. Tears poured down her cheeks as she lowered her eyes in shame. I have nowhere else to go," she said with tears in her eyes. "My son, David, he pushed me out. He no longer wants me." Her voice cracked, and she started crying like a child. Grace was deeply touched. Her face was full of shock and sorrow. "Your son? The same David you worked day and night for? The boy you gave your whole life to?" Margaret nodded slowly, crying harder now. "Yes, that same son. I have nothing left. Nowhere to lay my head. Please do not turn me away." Grace's eyes softened, her heart breaking for her friend. She reached out and held Margaret's hands. "Oh, my dear Margaret," she said gently, "you have suffered enough. I could never turn you away. Come inside. You will stay with me. You will not sleep on the street. You are welcome here." Margaret felt a small drop of comfort in her heart. She was glad and grateful that someone still cared and knew her pain. Grace led her inside, gave her a seat, and brought her a cup of water. "Rest now," she said kindly. "You are safe here. Whatever happened, God is still watching. He will not leave you like this." Margaret sat quietly in her friend's house. Her heart was still hurting, but she felt a little more at peace. Grace did everything she could to make her comfortable. She cooked for her, gave her a soft bed to sleep on, and often sat beside her at night, just talking and reminding her that she was not alone. Grace had never forgotten what Margaret once did for her many years ago. Back then, Grace had been in deep trouble. Her husband had fallen sick and she had no money. She had spent all she had paying his hospital bills. She had no food and no money. She also had a son then, and things were very difficult for them, but it was Margaret who helped her. Even though Margaret herself had so little, she still shared the little she had. She gave Grace food and comforted her until she was able to stand on her feet again. Grace had never forgotten that kindness. She always told herself that if the chance ever came, she would repay Margaret's love. And this was that chance. One evening, as Margaret was sitting in the living room, Grace's son came home. He had just returned from abroad after many years. When Grace introduced Margaret to him, his face was filled with respect and compassion. "So, this is the woman?" he asked with a smile. He bent down and took Margaret's hands gently. "Mrs. Margaret, I have heard so much about you. My mother told me everything you did for her when I was a boy. She told me how you stood by her when no one else did. If not for you, maybe I would not be where I am today." Margaret's eyes filled with tears. She shook her head softly. "Oh, my son, I only did what I could. We were all struggling then. I never thought it was anything great." But the young man smiled and said, "No, Mama, it was great. You saved my mother. You saved me too. And now it is my turn to thank you." The very next week, Grace's son surprised Margaret. He handed her an envelope filled with money. "Mama, this is for you. Please use it for yourself. You deserve peace after all your years of suffering." But that was not all. He also took her to see a small but beautiful house he had bought for her. Margaret stood in front of the house with tears streaming down her face. She pressed her hands together and asked in surprise, "Is this really for me?" "Yes, Mama," the young man said with a smile. "It is yours. From now on, you will never be homeless again, and you will never lack. I will also place you on a monthly allowance. Every month, I'll send money into your bank account so that you will always have enough. You gave so much of yourself to others. Now it is time for you to rest." Margaret fell to her knees and raised her hand to the sky. Her voice was filled with appreciation. "Thank you, Lord. Thank you for remembering me, and thank you, my son, for being an answer to my prayers." But even with all that comfort, Margaret's heart did not allow her to be lazy. She had lived a life of work, sacrifice, and love. To sit back and do nothing felt wrong. So, instead of staying at home all day, she began to dedicate her time to taking care of homeless children and orphans. Every morning she would wake up early, prepare food, and visit children who had no parents. She would hold them, tell them stories, and wipe their tears. She made sure they never went hungry, just like she once made sure her son never did. She used her house as a place of comfort, a place where children could come and feel safe. Soon, people began to notice. They saw how Margaret, even after all the pain and rejection she faced, still gave love freely. She became like a mother to many children, not just one. And the more she gave, the more peace she felt in her heart. Meanwhile, back at David's house, Beatrice was finally living the life she had always dreamed of. With Margaret gone, she walked around the house like a queen. She filled the wardrobes with clothes from the costliest boutiques and bought shoes she would never even wear. Every week, she called her friends to come over, and together they laughed, drank, and boasted about their luxurious lives. As for David, his new position at work kept him busier than ever. He was traveling from one city to another, attending meetings, and signing documents. Sometimes, when he was alone in his hotel room or at home, he often thought of his mother. He remembered her gentle smile and the way she would always wait at the door to bless him whenever he returned from work. He felt guilty each time he thought of how he pushed her out, but Beatrice always knew how to silence his thoughts. Whenever he spoke about his mother, Beatrice would frown her face and say, "David, please, don't start this again. You know your mother never liked me. She was poisoning your heart against me. If she had her way, we would not even be together. You did the right thing by choosing your wife. One day you will thank me for helping you make that hard choice." David would nod quietly, even though his heart still misses his mother. Beatrice's words sounded right in his ears, but something deep inside him told him otherwise. But even after his mother left, they tried and tried to have a child. But as the years rolled by, Beatrice never got pregnant. Doctors said nothing was wrong. Yet month after month, disappointment piled up. David, however, wasn't bothered. He was more focused on his job, and Beatrice strangely didn't care either. One bright afternoon, Margaret was walking hand in hand with a group of orphans she was caring for on the street when a very wealthy couple noticed her. They stopped their car and looked at her closely. "Wait," the woman told her husband. "Isn't that Margaret? The woman who used to work for us as a cleaner years ago?" The man looked carefully, and then his eyes widened. "Yes, that's her. But what is she doing in this city? I thought her son lives in Novo City." They stepped out of their car and went to meet her. Margaret was surprised they still remembered her, but she greeted them with her usual respect. The couple asked her where she lived, why she wasn't with her son, and how life had been. Margaret's voice broke as she told them her story, the suffering she endured, and how Beatrice framed her and pushed her out of her own son's house. The couple's eyes filled with tears. They remembered how, many years ago, Margaret had cleaned their offices faithfully, never complaining, always working hard even when she looked exhausted just because she wanted to raise money to take care of David. They also remembered how she had once approached them, humbly begging for a chance for her son. "Please, help my boy," she had pleaded then. "He is brilliant. I just want him to succeed. Please find him a job, any job. Just give him a chance. He just graduated from the university." It was because of her that they had offered David a job in the first place. It was because of her sweat, her tears, and her reputation for honesty that they trusted and employed him. But David didn't know this. He thought he got the job by luck, that he was employed because of his outstanding certificate. When the couples heard how David repaid his mother after all she did for him, their hearts turned cold. The man shook his head slowly. "So, this is how David has treated you? Throwing you out after everything you did for him?" Margaret bowed her head. "He is my son," she said. "I still pray for him every night. I only wish he would see the truth one day." The woman held Margaret's hand tightly and told her, "You are a mother with a golden heart, but he has broken it, and he must face the fruit of his actions." That same week, the wealthy couple called an urgent board meeting in David's company. David had no idea he was about to receive the shock of his life. He walked into the conference room proudly, thinking it was another promotion or commendation. But instead, he met the same board members who once looked at him with admiration, now looking at him with shame and disappointment. "David," the chairman said firmly, "I know you may not know this, but we brought you into this company because of your mother. She worked for us many years ago, and her sacrifice and honesty touched us. We believed that a son raised by such a woman would carry the same values. But now, we know the truth. We have seen how you cast her away, how you dishonored the very woman who made you who you are. If a man can betray his own mother, how can we trust him with our business?" David's heart sank in his chest. His face was covered with shame. He didn't know what to say or how to defend himself. How can he explain to them that his wife was the reason? Please, sir. I can explain," he stammered and pleaded desperately. But it was too late. The board had already made their decision. "From today," the chairman declared, "you are no longer employed in this company. Pack your things and leave." David walked out of the room as if his world had shattered. All the efforts and sacrifices he put into the company, they didn't consider all that. They didn't even look at his track record of excellence. They simply dismissed him because of what he did to his mother. In that moment, he also felt what his mother had felt months ago, when he kicked her out of his house. David's world fell apart the day he lost his job, but that was only the beginning of his problems. At first, he tried to act strong and assured Beatrice that everything would be fine. He started applying for job positions with his qualifications, and he felt it was only a matter of time before another company hired him. But weeks passed, and then months. Every morning, David left the house with his credentials in a folder, walking from one office to another under the hot sun, begging for opportunities. But each time, he came back home tired and disappointed. All the employers gave him the same answer: "We will get back to you." But they never did. Beatrice started changing towards him. The woman who once greeted him from work with a beautiful smile now frowned whenever she saw him. She spent her days visiting salons, attending parties, and scrolling through her phone while David went around the city in search of a job. Their once beautiful house began to empty out as David was forced to sell his car, then his second car, then some furniture, just to keep up with Beatrice's endless demands. His savings, which had taken years of sweat and sleepless nights, disappeared in just a few months under her careless spending. The worst was the way she started talking to David. Whenever he tried to talk about their struggles, Beatrice would get upset and shout at him, "Don't blame me for your failure. Look at my friends' husbands. They're buying their wives' cars, building houses, taking them abroad. And here I am, stuck with a man who can't even keep a job. Do you know how embarrassing it is for me?" Each word broke David's heart. He had lost the comfort of his mother, and now his wife, the one he had chosen above her, was tearing him apart piece by piece. One evening, after a long, humiliating day of job hunting, David returned home unexpectedly early. When he got to the door of his bedroom, he heard Beatrice talking to someone on the phone, and her words shocked him deeply. "Listen," she said, "I told you I don't want to get pregnant, and I never will. Not for him. Do you think I love David? Never. I only stayed because of his money. But now that he's useless, what do I need him for? I can't waste my life with a man who has nothing. There are men out there who can give me the life I deserve, rich men who can keep me in luxury. I'm only waiting for the right time. Then I'll leave him for good." David couldn't believe his ears. He wished it was a nightmare he would wake from. But it was real. Every word hurt him deeper, reminding him of his mother he had cast out for this same woman. But Beatrice didn't notice he was back. She was too busy pouring out her wicked confession. Tears filled his eyes, but he didn't make a sound. He sat on the bare floor and thought of his mother, how she had loved him, how she had prayed for him, how she had warned him that he would regret his choice. And now, her words have come true. For the first time in his life, he realized he had lost everything. His career, his wealth, his respect, his mother, and now even the woman he had sacrificed everything for. Out of rage and anger, he stormed into the bedroom. His eyes were red. "Beatrice," he called, "is this true? Everything I just heard. Tell me it's not true." Beatrice turned to him in surprise, but suddenly started laughing, as if she was mocking his pain. "Oh, so you finally know? Good. Then let me say it to your face. I don't love you, David. I never did. You think I would waste my youth with a broke, hopeless man? I only stayed for the money. Now you have nothing, and I am not ready to suffer with any man." David looked at her with tears in his eyes. "After everything? After all the sacrifices I made for you? He said with a broken voice, but Beatrice cut him off with a wave of her hand and a wicked voice. "Spare me the drama, David. I can't be with a jobless, poor, hopeless man. You're finished, and I'm not going to waste my life with a failure. I deserve better." The next morning, Beatrice packed her things without wasting any time. As she left the house, David tried to beg her to stay, but she pushed him away and walked out. Some days later, divorce papers arrived. To add salt to his wounds, she demanded half of the little he had left. And that was the moment David's world truly collapsed. He was alone and jobless, and the rooms in his house were all empty. He had sold everything he had to make ends meet, and Beatrice had taken the little he had left. But what hurt him the most wasn't Beatrice's betrayal. It was the memory of his mother, Margaret. He realized that Beatrice had lied all along, that she had framed his mother to get rid of her. He had cast his mother away for the very woman who destroyed him. He tried to search for his mother, but it was as if she had disappeared from the face of the earth. He went back to the old neighborhoods where she once worked, asking people if they had seen her. Some people told him no, while some people told him words that broke his heart the most. "You're only looking for her now? Where were you when she needed you?" Months passed and David had grown thinner. He spent his days roaming the streets in search of work, but every door shut in his face, and every night he could not sleep. Then one fateful morning, as he walked past a newspaper vendor's stand, something caught his eye. He couldn't believe his eyes at what he saw. On the front page of a major newspaper was a picture of Margaret, his mother. She looked happy, and her smile was full of joy. She was surrounded by children in an orphanage. The headline read, "Elderly Hero. Honored. Margaret receives award for dedication to orphans and homeless children." David's hand shook as he grabbed the paper. His heart beat faster as he read the newspaper. It spoke of a woman who had once struggled in silence, who had endured suffering but had turned her pain into compassion for others. It described how she now dedicated her life to orphans and the homeless, providing shelter, food, and love to those who had no one. It told of how she had become a mother to the motherless and a light in the darkness of many lives. And as David read the newspaper, tears streamed down his face. His heart was filled with regret. He could not believe that the same mother he had thrown into the streets with nowhere to go now stood honored before the world, while he, her only son, was reduced to nothing. David did not waste a second. He read the name of the orphanage mentioned in the article, and without caring about how he looked or where he was, he began the desperate search for her. The journey took many hours, but David finally arrived at the city where the orphanage was located. His heart pounded faster as he approached the gates of the orphanage. He felt ashamed, and for a moment, he almost turned back, scared of what his mother might say, or if she would even want to see him at all. When he entered the compound, he saw many children playing happily, and then, amidst the noise, he saw Margaret, his mother. She was standing under a tree, and a lot of children gathered around her. She was holding a tray of food and was smiling as she gently served the children, making sure each child got their share. For a long moment, David just stood there, watching her as tears fell down from his eyes. Then, he fell to the ground and started crying uncontrollably. Margaret looked in his direction. Their eyes met, and for a moment, time seemed to stop. Margaret froze. Her heart skipped a beat as she recognized David, her son, the boy she had raised with her tears and sweat, the man who had cast her aside like a burden, now kneeling before her, crying like a lost child. "Mother," his voice cracked. "Mother, please forgive me." David crawled forward on his knees, holding the edge of her dress like a desperate child. "Mother, I was blind. I was foolish. I let her poison my mind against you. I betrayed you, the only person who ever truly loved me. Please, please forgive me. If you cast me away, I'll understand. But don't stop being my mother. I need you. I need you more than ever." Margaret's heart shook. It was torn between anger and love, and tears filled her eyes. She bent slowly, shaking with emotion. "David," she called, her voice breaking. "Do you know what it felt like, being thrown out by my own son? The son I starved for? The son I prayed for every night? I thought my heart would stop beating that day. I thought I had lost you forever." David cried and begged his mother for her forgiveness. Margaret's heart softened. She knelt and held his face and hugged him. "I forgive you, my son," she said, crying. They held each other and wept, and for the first time in months, David felt safe and loved again. After that day at the orphanage, David never left his mother's side again. He knew he could never undo the past, but he was determined to write a new story filled with honor, gratitude, and love. With Margaret's blessing, he began helping at the orphanage, pouring his energy into caring for the same children who had embraced her when he had not. The more time he spent there, the more he realized that wealth and status meant nothing without family and love. Slowly, life began to change. Through the connections Margaret had built with kind-hearted people, David was offered a new job, and it gave him joy. He worked diligently, driven by the desire to provide for his mother and to make her proud again. 1 year later, David met a young, beautiful woman called Amanda. She was the opposite of Beatrice. She was gentle, humble, and full of compassion. She loved children deeply and often volunteered at the orphanage alongside Margaret. What drew David most to her was the way she treated his mother, with deep respect and affection. She would sit with Margaret for hours, listening to her stories and laughing with her. For the first time in many years, Margaret felt peace in her heart. She had prayed endlessly for her son's happiness, and now she saw that prayer being answered before her very eyes. When David asked Amanda to be his wife, Margaret's heart overflowed with joy, and she blessed their union with all the strength of a mother's love. Their wedding was simple, but filled with genuine happiness, unlike the expensive wedding he had with Beatrice. As the years went by, David and Amanda were blessed with beautiful children. Margaret became the happiest grandmother. She lived peacefully with her son, his loving wife, and her grandchildren. There was no mansion or luxurious cars, just love, laughter, and harmony. The very things her heart had longed for all her life. And as she watched David's family grow, she whispered a prayer of gratitude each night. "Thank you, Lord. My labor was not in vain. Moral lesson. This story reminds us that money, beauty, and pride will all fade, but the love and sacrifice of a parent can never be replaced. A child who forgets the tears and labor of their parents walks the road of regret. Honor your parents, treasure family, and never let the lies of others blind your heart. True wealth is not in riches but in love, respect, and gratitude. To my lovely viewers, what part of this story touched you the most? Do you think David deserved his second chance? Please share your thoughts in the comment section. I would love to read from you. I also have another very interesting story coming in a few days, so please subscribe to my channel and turn on the notification bell so you'll be notified immediately I upload it. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the like button and share it with your friends. Thank you so much for watching and supporting. God bless you all, and see you in the next story.